Hello everyone, Ariam here, and welcome back to another episode of Extinction Event. Today, we're talking about one of my very favorite squishy little guys, the Hellbender. Now, for an animal with a name as fierce as the Hellbender, you'd expect it to be terrifying, striking fear into the hearts of everyone who comes across it. But he's just a little salamander. He's the biggest salamander in the entirety of North America, but he is still a salamander. But don't worry, if you think that name is much too serious for this little guy, it has plenty of nicknames that feel a little bit more on the money, like Snot Otter, Mud Dog, Devil Dog, Mud Devil, Water Dog. It keeps going, but I think Snot Otter is really where it peaks. Allegedly, some other nicknames include Lasagna Lizard and Grampus, and as someone who lives in the territory of these animals, I have never heard them called that before, but I'm choosing to believe that very specifically someone somewhere is using these names. Now, I said that the Hellbender is the biggest salamander species in all of North America, so that means it's pretty giant, right? Well, not really. They range from around 10 inches long to around 16 inches long, which for a salamander is really big. But it is also in the family of the Chinese and Japanese giant salamanders, which can reach 6 feet in length, so this is a little bit of a short king. But he is a king nonetheless. And what kind of king? A king of environmental conservation. Scientists actually consider hellbenders a really good indicator of the water health of creeks and streams. Most salamanders have a pretty typical lifespan. They start out as eggs and then they hatch into larvae, which an axolotl is the larval form of a salamander. Axolotls just happen to not develop into a true adult form unless they are very stressed. So most salamander larvae look a lot like axolotls with those very visible gills. I actually based this Hellbender pose on a picture of an axolotl because every single picture of a Hellbender I can find, it just looks like a flat pile of dirt. And while I relate to that on an emotional level, it's not very exciting visually. But unlike axolotls, most salamander species will develop from the larval form into the adult form, which loses its gills, develops lungs, and goes from a fully aquatic lifestyle to a land-based lifestyle where they just exist in moist areas. Adult hellbenders are weird in the fact that they spend almost 100% of their time underwater, even though they lose their true gills and develop lungs. But they also don't really tend to come up to breathe air from the surface. They really do spend most of their time existing underneath rocks and buried in the mud. So how on earth do they breathe? Well, they actually sort of passively absorb oxygen from the water directly through their skin. Now, amphibians do have skin that really readily allows different things to pass through it, and it's one reason they need to stay hydrated, and another reason that you really should try not to touch frogs, salamanders, and other wet amphibians with your bare hands, because the oils from your hands and any chemicals that might be on them can really easily leach into the amphibian. Hellbender adults just take this one step further. If they're going to go ahead and absorb everything else through their skin, why not oxygen as well? But this is what makes them an indicator of waterway health. If you are both breathing and drinking through your skin, and you don't really have control over that process, any change to the water around you is really going to hit you hard. So things like loss of oxygen in the water due to algae blooms, things like that. Also water pollution. These things hit hellbender populations really hard. In the eastern United States, where hellbenders are most prevalent, It's been noted that in places like Missouri, their populations have declined by over 77% since the 80s. Other hellbender populations in areas like Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Maryland, Arkansas, and Kentucky are considered endangered or locally extinct. Currently, the hellbender population as a whole is considered vulnerable, which is actually an improvement. Their populations are slowly starting to rebound, likely in part due to things like the Clean Water Act, more widespread knowledge about water pollution and cleaning up local waterways, as well as breeding programs in zoos and other nature centers. So you definitely have more of a chance now than 40 years ago to find one of these mud puppies out in the wild. If you do, remember, touch them with clean hands only or leave them alone entirely. These are truly a wonderful find. They are a bucket list animal for me. I live in regions where they are native, but I have never seen one in person before that was not in a zoo, so I certainly hope to one day. And among maybe a little bit of disgust or hesitation, the idea of holding one of these snot otters should remind you to smile.